little further. I'll read.
Please. I'd love to see that.
This is from Ecclesiastes chapter 8. There's nothing better than being wise, knowing how to interpret the meaning of life. Wisdom puts light in the eyes and gives gentleness to words and manners. Here's something that happens all of the time and makes no sense at all. Good people get what's coming to the wicked, and bad people get what's coming to the good. I tell you, this makes no sense. It's smoke. So I'm all for just going ahead and having a good time, the best time possible. The only earthly good men and women can look forward to is to eat and drink well and have a good time. Compensation for the struggle these few years God gives us on earth. Did you know that was in the Bible? Well, I promise you, I am reading from Ecclesiastes 8. Well, I determined to load up on wisdom and examine everything taking place on earth. This is Solomon, most likely, reputed to be, within the Judeo-Christian tradition, the wisest man ever to live. And by the way, my study of philosophy and my study of quantum mechanics has convinced me that he was so far ahead. There were some other people who were onto some of his ideas, but Solomon actually did say some things that it's taken Western philosophy and science thousands more years to say. So it is a remarkable thing that this one man was so wise. When I determined to load up on wisdom and examine everything taking place on earth, I realized that if you keep your eyes open day and night without even blinking, you'll still never figure out the meaning of what God is doing on this earth. Search as hard as you like, you're not going to make sense of it. No matter how smart you are, you won't get to the bottom of it. And now, from Ecclesiastes 1 verse 2, meaningless, says the teacher, utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. And then from Proverbs 6, verse 6, learn by watching an anthill. What in the world? How do you learn? By watching an anthill. We're going to try to unpack what that might have meant to learn by watching an anthill. Why would this person, so deep and so wise, have said that we could learn anything other than maybe entomology? You know, the entomology of a particular species of Hymenoptera, whatever ants you're looking at. But what are we supposed to learn about philosophy or spirituality from watching an anthill? We're going to unpack that. We'll see if we can watch an anthill, so to speak. When it says meaningless in that translation, in the King James, it says, and some of you have heard this, probably heard this verse somewhere from a sermon or from somebody just quoting, making a plaque or something. It actually says vanity, all is vanity. You ever heard that? Vanity, it's all just vanity. The cool thing is that in the Hebrew, it doesn't say meaningless by any stretch. In fact, what it says is great meaning. It's huge meaning. And it also doesn't say vanity. Whatever vanity might mean, whether it's just a waste of time with self-focus or whatever. That's exactly what it doesn't say. In the Hebrew, the word is very close to the Hebrew word for soap bubbles. Soap bubbles. It's all just soap bubbles. And that's huge. Just huge. In fact, if everything is just soap bubbles, if everything, the stuff things are made of, you and I, our thoughts, if it's all just soap bubbles, that's huge wisdom, just huge, because it's taken us until actually early in the last century, in the early 20th century, it took Western science that long to get to the point from a scientific viewpoint that everything really is made out of nothing. All the stuff we see that we think is so important and solid and reliable is so definitely, get this, made out of relationships between other things that are also made out of nothing but relationships between other things. Now that doesn't seem, you saying, okay, that's some weird nonsense. There's some vanity, there's some smoke and nonsense is what the teacher is saying. I don't know how many of you have studied even just the tiniest little bit in high school physics or in college physics, or looked at stuff on YouTube to learn anything about quantum theory, about how all the ways that most of us are, as educated people, are used to looking at things. You take two billiard balls on the pool table, and you roll one into the other, and boom, it hits it and it moves, and you can measure the force that was applied to the second ball. And then you can measure all the energy and trajectories and everything. If you have all the information, it all makes sense from cause and effect. So then we start inventing things like microscopes. And we start looking smaller and smaller at things and convincing ourselves, yes, looking through a microscope, that's still true. Things make logical sense. They add up mathematically. But then we got better and better at looking different ways, smaller and smaller. Smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, until we got to the point that there isn't any such thing as smaller. It turns out that there's actually a point where you can't make things any smaller. There's no such thing at all. You don't just get half of another thing. I need a piece of paper. Let's just tear up part of this in here. I need some scissors. If I take this, and it could be anything. We could have chosen, like some of this Formica. We could have taken a hair from your head, or from your knuckles if you have hairy knuckles. Some of you might have hairy knuckles and eat raw meat for breakfast. I don't know. Most of you hopefully not. But it could be rubber from a tire. It could be metal from my glasses frame, whatever alloy, fancy springy metal that is. It could be leather. It could be water. It could be some of the air that we're breathing right now. Just pick whatever you want, what kind of molecule, and purify it, and you can have that. Whatever it is, if we take something and we cut it so that now we have half as much, and then I say, okay, I'm going to do it again. But let's pretend that I'm actually doing it really carefully. We're measuring it, and I'm actually doing exactly half. And so I have half as much as I did, right? Then I do it again. And then I do it again. And I keep going until I have to use a laser to do the cuts. I go so small that without a microscope, we couldn't see it. But then I keep going. I keep cutting half, and tossing away the other half, letting it just go. Get down to where, now here's where your high school chemistry comes in. You're roughly aware that things are made of molecules, is that correct? And that the molecules are made of atoms of the different elements in the periodic table, correct? You know a little bit about the fact that there is a periodic table of the elements. You know, there's hydrogen and helium and boron, right? You know, you can go through that list. At least you can look it up. And what that is different atoms that are made up of a differing number of pretty much the same kind of little things that are smaller than atoms, so we call them subatomic particles. There's in the middle, and we kind of draw it like a solar system, like the sun that has the planets going around it. We kind of draw it like that, with a nucleus in the middle, kind of like our sun, and then with these things going around it that we draw how many ever electrons there are that are even smaller than the pieces of things in the middle. And in the middle, there's protons that have a positive charge, and there's neutrons that have no charge. And how many neutrons and protons something has determines its atomic weight. Now, its atomic weight can be expressed really just in terms of how many there are of those subatomic particles. So let's say I've cut this so carefully that I get down to where I have a single molecule. Now, this paper I'm sure has some fiber in it, which is a carbohydrate. It's a left-handed carbohydrate. So let's say I take that molecule, just one molecule of that, and I cut it, and I keep cutting it until all I'm left with is a single carbon atom, a pure elemental representation of carbon. Okay? Carbon has an atomic weight of 12 and is the sixth. Its atomic number is 6. And let's say we just take that single carbon atom. Now we're going to, with that carbon atom, we're going to just cut it. And then it's not going to go, well, I suppose it could, because it's an even number, it could go perfectly in half. But let's just say we end up reducing it down to where we have just one of its subatomic particles. So, I don't know if I can cut that small. Oh, look, I did. Check it out. I've got a single subatomic particle here. Oh, the scissors. Man, we have powerful imaginations. More powerful than you realize. Because, fast forward, because except that our minds make something so, the thing doesn't even have any particulate nature. It is our perception of those particles that make them actually have any of the fundamental characteristics of matter. How in the world can our brain do that? Or our consciousness or whatever? How does it do that? Well, we'll see. So here I have one subatomic particle. It turns out that I can take a subatomic particle, which is funny because atom comes from the Greek atomi, which means a is not or can't, and tomi is to cut. It's cutting, so can't be cut. So they thought atoms were the things that couldn't be cut, and so, okay, now we've got it, we named them atoms. When we discovered that level of distinction, those little things, we named them atoms after what the Greeks had called this theoretical thing that couldn't be cut. And then we find that we can cut an atom into its smaller parts. In fact, not only that, the atom is giving off its parts and taking it, and things are going on all the time like that. Radioactive things are giving off particles from an atom. That's how come they're radioactive. So we have this, well, there it went. I better retrieve it because we still have to cut it again. So here I have this single subatomic particle, you can call it a proton if you want. And then I want to say, could I cut that again? Turns out I can. I can actually cut it again. But what I end up with, when I cut it again, is several of what we call a quark. And it turns out that when I take one of those, and I want to cut it, I should be able to cut it and have half of a quark or whatever quarks are made out of, shouldn't I? I should be able to just take that little piece of stuff, cut it again, and then I should have half as much stuff. But that's not true. It's not true. In fact, it turns out that if we take stuff, anything, your desk, your fingernail, the little piece of plastic from the hand on your watch, the little button on your iPhone, some of the little plastic there, anything, we cut it far enough, we get to the point where if you cut it again, you don't get two pieces of stuff anymore. What do you get? What do you get if you cut things again?
Nothing.
Not nothing. Well, nothing in terms of
It
matter.
multiplies,
hmm?
it multiplies in peace.
So you should have a half of one of those, right? Seems like it, because matter is matter. But I'm going to write something on the board, and it's just a hint what we get. Who said that? Did you say energy? Well, you're the man. In fact, we actually know if you take some stuff and you cut it so many times that it's not stuff anymore, we not only know what we get, but we know how much of it we get. Who came up with this? Einstein. And have you ever wondered why people make such a big deal out of it? I mean, what's important about him except his hairdo? Because he had one cool head of hair.
I mean, it's kind of reminiscent of what it says in the Bible, that there's nothing new under the sun. So basically, like energy and matter, like it's all the same stuff. So
That's a good way to put it. That is a good way to put it. Energy and matter are kind of like the same stuff. Whoa, that is hopelessly tangled. How does it happen? We can do this. Oh, almost. Wow. Progress. As it turns out, this notion of energy and stuff doesn't actually answer our question. I gotta get this out of here. Well, I guess we'll have to do it with it in. I need a volunteer. Okay, you hold that in. I'm gonna come over here and see if I can possibly rescue our spring. Might be doable. Are there some things that once you do them, they're hard to undo? Not. Toothpaste, once it comes out of the tube. Words. You can damage relationships so that they don't seem to ever be the same connection. Airbags! Watch out for that car ahead. Airbags. That was not theory, was it? That was experimental, huh?
That was an experience.
It was experience. Was it borrowed?
No, it's fine.
Okay. I don't know if that's better or worse.
Realizations.
Realizations. Once you realize certain things, you can't unknow them unless we do some of the things that we've come up with in the last couple of years that show that we can figure out where you're storing it or accessing it anyway in your brain. Somehow you managed to take away those terrible memories. We're sort of hacking the brain when we do that, aren't we? Or the mind or something. Or our memory's part of the mind. Our memory's part of the mind or not. So if you lose your memories, have you lost your mind? You erase your memories, but you can still think and figure things out. Yeah, baby. Okay. Now, we can agree that the slinky is made of matter, correct? It's stuff. It's metal. Feel it? You could heat it up with a torch and make it red hot. We could put it in acid, and it would disintegrate. But let's say that I create something that's not a slinky, but something you and I would still agree exists. Do you see the wave? Does the wave exist? It exists. Can I take that wave and weigh it on a scale? The wave? No. Can I take the wave and say what color the wave is?
No.
Ooh, we're not quite together on that. The wave itself. Now, think about it. If it's a slinky you're talking about, what color the slinky is. That's one thing. But just the wave. What is the wave?
Energy.
It's energy. What kind of energy? It's kinetic energy. Okay. But the slinky isn't kinetic energy, is it?
No.
It's matter. But is it the same stuff? Is it the same stuff?
It's that up there.
It's that up there. And you know what that formula is? It's a relationship. It's a relationship. And you know what this wave is? It's energy. Yes, but it's a relationship. It describes a relationship between the parts of this slinky and the whole slinky. Does it not? If you have a relationship with somebody, let's say you meet the love of your life, and you have that butterflies in the stomach kind of feeling, and you see them and you're planning your whole future differently now that you have engaged in this relationship because somebody said, "I love you." What color is that? How much does that weigh? It doesn't matter. Now, I can tell you what color you are and how much you weigh, right? You are able to be expressed in matter, but the relationship isn't even able to be expressed in matter. But, you know, the Bible says that we're not really just what we look like and what we can weigh either. Do you know that man looks on the outward appearance, but God looks on the heart? Oh, so he knows what my heart is, you know, the chambers and the sinoatrial node and valves and the Purkinje fibers and all of that stuff. He knows all. Is that what it's talking about? Or is heart meaning something else? Yeah. Isn't that the part where you live and have your being? And where it's you instead of something else? He knows about that. Let me pay you well for this, okay? You were up here for a long time. Oh, you paid her? Yeah. Can you pay her again? She was up here for a long time. Give her a hand. I'm grateful. That slinky will be there to remind you of what we did. And you know what it represents when you see it up here, right? If I asked you on a test about something that's up here, like these, if I asked you about these on a test, you would have some idea why they're up there. Why are these up here? Who said that? What? Was that you? What? Okay, that's one reason. What else?
Show us how we're being constantly led into something.
To be what?
We're constantly being led to believe something.
We're constantly being led to believe something.
I think deception.
Deception. But not just deception of other people when they're trying to manipulate us, right? But it's also about how we deceive ourselves so we can avoid having every day to renegotiate our understanding of everything in the universe. Because we find out things every day. Every day. We take in information. We don't process it always. We have a way to not process it. We file drawer it. Or we don't even let it in when it doesn't fit. In fact, experiments have shown that you can show people right in front of their face some bizarre and conspicuous, unbelievable things. Have you ever seen that illustration where they do this psychological experiment where there's people that are shooting baskets on full court basketball, and somebody is asked, I think, to say how many times the ball changes possession between teams. You know, how many turnovers are there? And so they're watching this intently, and then at the end of the thing, they ask them how many times did it change over, and they say, 11 times or 7 times or whatever, and they say, about how long was the gorilla on the court? Huh? There's a gorilla on the court? What a bunch of baloney. Watch it again. And they show him again, and some joker in a gorilla suit is going out there doing this on the basketball court, like right in front of everybody. Dude in a gorilla suit, a big dude. And they said, oh no, you added that. No, the glory of it is that you can record a person watching it and record it at the same time, and then record the whole thing and then play it back to your own satisfaction. There was definitely a gorilla. But their brain says, well, of course there's no gorillas there. Our brain takes in information, and before we get to see it in our perceptual awareness, sort of our conscious movie screen, it processes it and it takes out the stuff that seems like crap. Otherwise, we would get so much stuff that doesn't fit and make any sense that our whole experience would be senseless. It would have no themes. We wouldn't track from one thing to the next. We would be infinitely fractally thinking and not able to get anything figured out, observed, or done at all. So, it's only the tiniest little bit of information that we actually take in through our senses that we are ever bothered with. How does your tailbone feel right now?
Sore.
It's sore. Did you fall on it wrong?
No, I hate these chairs.
Oh, these chairs. You do, really?
I do, yeah.
Oh, I don't like them.
No.
They're wrong for your body.
Yeah, I'm short and things like that.
Funny, and my name means short, and here I'm 5'11". Shoot. It's not that tall, but it's not that short either. But it really does. It means, Kurtz is Yiddish for shorty. It's pejorative.
My last name means little shoes.
Little shoes!
Mm-hmm.
My best friend, he's the library director. We've been friends since I was in 8th grade. His name comes from the German. And he had to look it up to help his kid do some genealogy project. And my kids, when I helped them, I already knew they're going to prep and they're doing their family thing and all that, and I guess social studies. And they say, what's our name mean? I said, well, it's a pejorative way, sort of an insulting way to say short. Like, since it's Yiddish, yeah, short, but the other kind of short, like Yiddish is always a little nasty too. Everything in Yiddish always has a little nastiness to it. So any kind of short you can think of in Yiddish, and they're going, oh, Dad. And then my buddy tells his kids what their last name is, and it's an old German way of saying warrior, and it's maker of the wounds. Whoa! Dude! What's yours mean?
It's like a perfect gamer name. Like,
How is it fair? Life is just not fair, It turns out that at any moment, how many people were not already thinking about how their tailbone felt when I said that? We're not thinking about it until I said it. So several of you had you just gave it no thought at all, how your tailbone felt. You know what though? Think about how much your left foot bothers you inside of your shoe right now. I mean, you can't move it the way you need to. And it's kind of like, oh. think about how uncomfortable it is in there. It's like kind of itchy and, you know, but just focus on all the sensations that it has, like clear back, like the side of the heel and everything. Think about that, you know, roll it around a little bit, give it some thought, and it kind of hurts even, you know? It kind of hurts, doesn't it? When you think about it.
This is mean.
I know it is, and it's hypnotic, but it's true. We aren't thinking about that. But when we start thinking about it, it can even become painful. That's how people a lot of times get chronic pain. It turns out that on the cortex in your brain, the part that's right here, the part that feels, it's constantly allocating and reallocating how much real estate, how much of that surface that's dedicated in this like top stripe for giving you the sensations of your body. At the moment, how much each thing takes. Maybe if you've taken general psychology, you've seen pictures of what they call the body sensory homunculus, where they draw a picture of a dude in the proportion with the body parts, the size in ratio to each other for how much cortex is usually allocated. You know, these big old lips, you know, and enormous hands, and then you got these tiny little legs, because you're not really thinking that much about how your legs feel. Only they're huge, but you're not thinking about the skin on your legs. Or you are now. Now you're thinking about the skin on your legs and how itchy they are and all that. When I say that and you start focusing on it, it actually changes how much area is dedicated in your brain to representing the sensations from that body part. If, in fact, you get your arm cut off, have a car accident, or you're in the middle of an IED or something, boom, you lose your arm. You can't get rid of the sensations, and the more you think about the sensations, the more it grows and grows and grows and grows, a bigger spot. It turns out that with a lot of chronic pain, the pain is only that you're hyper-focused on the spot. Like what I did to you with some of you at work, probably with your foot. You have to ask yourself if that is even real. Of course it's real. We perceived it. And it turns out, yes.
Do the sensations ever go away
For
amputees?
Yeah, they do. In fact, my major psychophysiology professor is one of the world's leading experts in phantom pain. One of the things that works really well is to let you finally deal with it. Because you're going, I got to stretch it, I got to rub it, I got to do something. Ramachandran, right, at Scripps in San Diego, he designed a box with mirrors and a fake hand that looks like the other hand, only it's mirror image of it. And they have that person sit there and look like they've got a hand, but they don't, or an arm, but they don't. But if they can see themselves scratching the thing, they can feel the sensation of them doing it and relieve that, or rubbing it, or whatever needs to be done. And that helps to resolve it and get the brain out of its stuck mode and shrink that and let the cortex be used for other things. So there are some effective therapies. One thing that you can do also is you can overwhelm that area by sending other kinds of signals like electricity along the nerve path that if the thing was there, or if it is there but it's not actually telling you to hurt, you got chronic pain in your hand or in your gut or whatever, if you send electricity through that circuit so that it has something else to focus on, it like reallocates it for that purpose, it doesn't mess with it anymore. So yes, good question. So why is this important to us? Well, whatever it is that you and I are experiencing at any moment, and at every moment, is such a tiny little slice, like a millionth of the information information that our senses are actually sending to the brain. And we're only experiencing just a little nothing amount of it. And it's worse than that. It's even worse than that. Okay, if an hour goes by, we could say this represents the hour. You would understand if I say, okay, here's 30 minutes, here's 45 minutes, yes? But instead, we'll just let this be like 1/100th of a second. It's just a very small amount of time, okay? Turns out that just like when you're taking a video, you know, when you take a video, it's not continuous. It's flashing, like taking a picture lots of times. If you go on the DVD and you try to go step by step by step by step, and you go frame by frame by frame, you know what a frame is. It turns out that even though you and I think intuitively that we're not like that, that's just how DVDs are. That's just how cell phone cameras are. They do how many frames per second. Turns out we're the same way. We're taking a certain number of frames per second. And it's called, for each of those frames, and how long it takes to take it, it's called a human perceptual moment. Do you know that that can vary? That can vary. You could be in a certain situation where you take pictures faster so that you don't miss so much information. And at other times, you could be in slow mode, like, and you're like, whoa, what just happened? Watch it at church potluck sometime when there's really old blue-haired people sitting, like, getting a seat out from their teeth after they have their dessert, and people that are still able are picking up the tables and putting them away, and you got a bunch of screwy little kids running around, you know, like hummingbirds. And old people, a lot of times, are bothered kind of nervously by kind of thing. When you watch the old people, when a young person is and flitting around here and then bouncing off of this and climbing up that and touching this and in a purse and over here and breaking this and dumping the flowers and that and that and that. And the old person will watch them and then they're still looking where the young person was, and it's like, oh, there they are. You have to kind of rediscover them. Do you wonder why is that? Why is that?
So as far as you've been talking, I really do enjoy, thank you. But at the same time, are you trying to prove the point that all of this, what you're saying, is meaningless? Like, I'm not
No, no. Fasten your seatbelt.
All right.
This roller coaster, you don't know all of the turns and twists because it's new every time you ride it. This is not a linear course, and philosophy is not linear. School is linear, but not this little part of it. This is random access. Okay, like your life. If you think your life is linear, it's going to be hard when it doesn't work. So here we take a picture, and then some time goes by, and we take another picture. And some time goes by, and we take another picture. What happens in between when we're taking a picture? We'll never know. We'll never know. Because we didn't take the picture. It didn't get registered. We didn't sample then. It's between sampling.
So you just said a while ago that if we perceive it, it's reality. So if we don't perceive it, it doesn't matter.
Good one.
Right?
Do you think that that's why like Snapchat is so big? We're trying to stay in the moment.
I don't know. That's a good question. What happens if this is your timeline here?
Are we still in a
That's all I
100th
want.
second?
But what if mine is this one? What if we sampled at different times?
you can't perceive 100th of a second, so it doesn't matter.
Correct, but you perceive the calculus of them all added together. What if they're out of sync?
Two people who are out of sync.
Then they're completely out of sync, aren't they?
By 100th of a second.
By all of the seconds, because it could be, we could set it up like this, theoretically. So this is you, and this is me. And there could be a process that is occurring that has this characteristic. And I'm catching all the amplitudes of it, and you're not. It never comes above. And say that the amplitudes represent the threshold of perceivability. So you miss this completely, and I get it every time.
Oh,
Bizarre? What does true mean?
Almost teacher.
And the answer is yes. Much of this is experimental.
Could this be why different people working cleansing will perceive things differently?
Good one. Good one. They're not all lying. They just didn't take in the same part. Right? What's the difference between your eyes with what you're focused on and out here?
You have blind spots.
Oh, there are blind spots.
Isn't that why we really shouldn't take witness testimony into account, because our perception and our memories are just bunk?
Well, they might not be bunk, but they're definitely partial and 100% made up. Because our whole experience is 100% made up based on what our senses are taking in. But it's only able to make it up according to our schema, according to our expectations of and what we'll accept to be real.
So just to clarify, basically everyone in this world has seen something differently from everybody else. Is that what you're trying to say? That everyone
We're always seeing things differently,
because of
but
the
we
way,
don't really know how much.
because of the way they perceive them.
Yes,
Is that because of their childhood or how they were raised? Does that have to play into
yes, yes, and yes for all the other things that you
Are
might
you
say.
gonna go more into that?
Yes.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
so what he was saying, like, it's not true or false, but it's like a
Different.
perception of that relationship that you're talking about.
That's excellent. That is such a simple way to look at things. If I ask you what kind of ice cream flavor you had when you went down to the Giant Dipper ice cream place on Main Street in St. Helena, can you answer true or false?
No.
No, because it's the wrong kind of variable. It's the wrong kind of data. You need to answer with a flavor. If I say, how do you feel today?
True.
False. We are always trying to make things be true or false. But life is more bizarre even than an essay question, and reality is not a matter of true or false. It's just not.
But don't you think that's kind of also our fault? Because a lot of time we try to polarize things, saying this is like right or wrong, and this is true and false.
Yes.
When, like you said, it's really just everybody has a different perspective of things. So,
Yes. I mean, some things are wrong,
Oh.
but based on what standard of wrongness? In the world of big things, like if I come break into your bedroom and steal your wallet, and I mean, I think everybody here has a way that we measure behaviors as right or wrong that would make that seem wrong, right? So at that level, there's definitely right and wrong. But as far as reality, right down to the little pieces that it's made out of, it just doesn't work.
Sometimes I'm not sure if this is just me, but I'm not exactly following what you're saying.
Great. Perfect.
I'm maybe not that smart, but
Well, you probably are.
Yeah, literally.
Have you ever, well, it's gonna get worse. So, mission accomplished. Mission accomplished. Have you ever had a dream? This is like a movie that happened a few years ago. Have you ever had a dream in which you dream that you wake up from a dream? Yeah. Have you ever had one of those dreams where you wake up and you're going, shoot, that wasn't real. Doggone it. You go, well, that would have been nice. We go back to sleep. How about the kind of dream where you wake up and you go, ah, golly, well at least that wasn't real.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you ever dreamt about waking up from a dream and saying, oh, I'm glad that wasn't real? And then you actually wake up and you find that it was. Yeah, the movie is Inception. Yes. I got you. Yeah, that whatever it is, it was gone. Right?
Oh.
I want to ask you if you can prove to me, or even to yourself right now, that you're not dreaming right this moment.
Oh, I remember.
Can you prove that you're not dreaming right this moment?
Well, I think if you like dream and stuff like that, I heard that like if you like look in a mirror or whatever and you don't see your reflection, that's how you know you're dreaming. Does that make sense? So like there's something about.
Why would that be true?
Huh?
Why would that be true?
Oh, never mind. Listen to you want the dollar back?
Because if it was true, then what if you just dreamt that it wasn't and looked in the mirror?
We can't.
We can't. That's the answer. There's no way. There's no way. There's no way that anyone's ever come up with that you could say right now that you're not dreaming, that you won't be waking up.
So why do you think we can prove that we're not dreaming?
I don't know.
Okay, so it's just a
Is that
statement.
I don't know why. Yeah, it's just a fact. I mean, why is light lighter than dark?
How is this fact if you don't know?
Yeah.
How, if I don't know how or why? Well, if that wasn't the case, then there would be no
question.
fact.
This is like 5 more.
Because you can't prove anything.
But you just proved the point that there has to be at least a moral baseline, right? So,
There does not have to be a moral
so
baseline.
but then how do you?
There happens to be, but there doesn't have to be.
Right. So you have to. Some things are absolute, right? So you're saying it might not be
I
wrong
think-
to go steal a
I
wallet.
think there are things that are absolute, but our ability to engage with them is another matter.
What?
That's
So you said
I don't-
when people die,
I'm trying to exhaust it.
Like we were in a dream right now, and then somebody died, would they be like waking up?
well, so here's the thing. That's entirely possible, but I don't think so. But the only reason I don't think so is my belief system. Is that I'm not used to thinking so, because I have no evidence the other way. In fact, there is some secondhand evidence that goes against that. But I still, in my belief system, in my schema, my worldview, what my church teaches, we die and we stay asleep until Jesus comes, and Jesus hasn't come.
But isn't that just your perception of what you think is going to happen? Or
Yeah.
so I'm saying like if you believe that to be true and that's your way of perceiving things, what if like
But I can't perceive it, I can only just have an opinion about it.
So do you think that there's like a possibility that we're all just like in a dream state right now and we're all in one big dream
That is possible.
and there's no escaping?
Yes. In fact, right now, and you guys can Google, don't take my word for this next statement, because this next statement is really wacky. This is a funky statement that I'm going to make.
Are you on recording?
Okay, you ready?
yep,
You should look this up. Don't take my word for it. Right now, a large number of the most important, brightest minds, the physicists, the CEOs of the companies that are giving you tomorrow, today, that are inventing things, that are the makers and doers, the people that are smarter than I aspire to be, believe that we are in a video game or something like that right now.
Rick and Morty, but we're
no,
alive.
oh my god.
Elon Musk is
Gotta
smart.
find one of those portal guys.
You don't believe they're smart? Well, then maybe there's a good point there. Maybe the definition of smart is something that there's lots of ways to define it, and you could define it in a way that they're not smart. But as far as being able to solve problems and have novel solutions and knowing a lot of things and making stuff happen, You're smarter than me.
They have help.
These loans
There's a lot of people working with them, but they are at the top for a
So
reason.
if you can't get out of the video game,
Reality itself is not a true or false, it's more of a perception.
I'm seeing that the indications are not only that it's just about your perceptions, but that by your perceptions, you're creating it as it happens. Not creating your perception of it, but creating it self, reality.
So about the dream statement, has anyone ever used that to justify crime?
Yes.
Like they think they're in a dream?
Yes, somnambularity defense. There are people who have sleep disorders that do not paralyze, where sleep states don't paralyze them when they're in REM sleep, and they've committed murders, and they're just totally out of character, and they have nothing to gain from it, no motive at all, and they're just, but there's people serving time in some states, and in other states there's people who successfully defended their charges. Yes, ma'am.
To go back to what we were saying about reality, so then is it that each of us have our own reality and that there's not one singular reality?
Well, yes and no. Did you hear what she said? Listen very carefully. Can you say that again?
I was asking, is it that each of us has our own reality and that there's not one singular reality because each of us is experiencing whatever it is we're experiencing individually?
Did you get that?
Yes.
That's pretty heavy. Is it the case that there is one actuality, reality, the real deal, and then we have varying perceptions of it, or are each of our perceptions the real deal for each of us, and that's all the real deal there is? Here's, and my answer to that was what? What did I say?
You did.
I said yes or no. Yes and no.
You did say yes.
Yes and no, right? Here's why I said yes and no. Because, as it turns out, it's possible, and there are indications that it might be the case, that the problem with that question is in assuming that there's actually a you and a me instead of just an us. The concept of yourself is not straightforward, although it seems like it is, and we're all darn sure that it is. But it's not really that true.
Right.
Why did people used to think that your thoughts and everything that in your mind was in your chest? Why did they think that? Because you have feelings there, because you perceive things there, right? Why do they now think that your mind is in your skull, inside your skull? Because they do experiments, which is the same thing that she said, right? Because we detect physical evidence that it's the case, right? How do they do these experiments? MRI, fMRI, PET, EEG, right? Lots of them. And they look at data from stroke patients. Guys like Phineas Gage, the famous guy that had a piece of tamping rod go right through his eye and blow out part of his frontal cortex and changed his character. You know, he was all right, but it changed his person. So it's convinced us that our brain is creating these things. What would happen if every time we look at what's functioning in the brain when somebody like smells the smell of strawberries or thinks about going for a walk or is angry, we go, oh, look at the brain, and then somebody has a stroke and it kills part of the brain and now they can't do a certain thing or have a certain kind of thought, or now their thoughts are different and consistently different than they used to be. Now they're synesthetic and they get their colors and numbers mixed up and all of that. What if, instead of those parts of the brain creating those, like being little machines that make that part of us happen, what if they're just somehow receivers, some kind of an antenna for something that's actually not occurring inside of our head, but that's just sort of like the antenna inside your cell phone circuitry? Because when you do stuff, when you look up something on your cell phone, on Google, Google is not in your cell phone. The cloud is not in your cell phone. Where is the cloud? Right. It's a relationship. What if reality is more like the cloud? The cloud, like when you do cloud storage or when you look up stuff, it's a big cloud. Anything like that. Not some proprietary cloud, but the notion of it's in cyberspace. Where is it? Right.
Is one of the basic issues in philosophy?
Yes.
Okay.
It's called ontology, which is a branch of metaphysics. And we are right on schedule. I know it's blowing your mind because this is not like algebra class.
I just wanted to know how this is fitting into the course of description. So.
Well, this isn't a history class, and it's not a math class, it's not a chemistry class, and it's not really a psychology class. What is this?
Oh, well, the course description says that it acquaints students with the basic issues of philosophy,
Yes.
including methods and values,
Yes,
from the perspective of Western civilization.
yes, that's what we're doing.
You're
You are experiencing right now philosophy, and it's pretty bizarre.
So you can't put any names or labels on the methods
Yes.
or values?
Yes, we will.
Okay.
Look, you can have the experience before we name it. You have a baby, then you name it. That's premature.
Topic 180.
So when you're asking us what if and you're telling us other people's views, what potential legal is?
About what?
I don't know. I really don't know what we're talking
There
about.
it is, then we agree. I don't know. You don't either.
We'll put that on the final.
But we usually, as human beings, think we do. But we don't. That's really important for the birth of philosophy. Yes, ma'am.
I mean, I think it's cool that you're trying to confuse us and stimulate thinking and all of this. But since we're like looking at it from like a perspective of like, oh, it's my perception and their reality and all this, will the test be like, if it's like you like, what is your name? And I write whatever I want, I get an answer, like, right? This is like philosophy, you know what I mean? You get what I'm saying? Like,
You did say yesterday that philosophy is the realization of knowing that you don't know.
Yes.
yeah.
And that's what we're talking about today too.
Yes.
Then how would that work for tests? Answering
Yeah, like-
questions.
I don't know.
Like,
I don't know.
It depends on who you are. It hasn't happened yet. Yes.
Okay, so
If you like things fastened down, if you really like things fastened down, you're gonna hate this.
right, okay, so I'm noticing that this is not for the type A person. However,
I'm type A.
you're facilitating conversation to basically make us realize we don't know
Yes.
anything, right?
Yeah.
So
So I could have just said we don't know.
So
Yeah,
this
sure.
is the point in our lives, right? A bunch of 20-somethings trying to figure out what's our purpose. What's the reason?
Right, perfect.
Right.
Perfect.
Cool. So
That's where we're heading.
This is all
Exactly.
illusory.
okay, I was just providing clarity. That was all. That was
Yes,
my
you
question.
were.
That was
And
just a
you're
statement.
foreshadowing because.
And I was trying to get that out.
Oh, hold that thought for a second.
Yes. Call it on me.
I'll be right back.
You learn more about yourself.
Because you're gonna ask them. Because you're going to ask them. You already have asked some of these questions.
But why?
We don't know why. We don't know. I mean, why? Why implies I want to master this and control this.
So there's no reason, it's just if it's true that we will ask these questions.
Yes, there might be a reason. Okay, I want to come back to your point. Okay.
I was already on my next one.
Confusion for one, like, hour and a half.
Okay, you test people. You want a list of things so that you can have something concrete that's going to be on the test.
Yeah, it's just confusing how he's doing it. I mean, I'm not really that confused,
You'll want that. If you want to know some hardcore stuff that's good for testing, that's an example. You'll want to have memorize that so that you don't even get them in the wrong order. Okay? What is it though? What is it?
So how would you go about answering those?
Oh, I take about 10 weeks to ask funky questions about different people that are going, what's wrong with you, you nut job?
Okay, so I feel like philosophy is not,
You
it's
see,
popular,
The
but not
third
that
one,
popular.
the third one is what you were asking.
What ought I to do?
Yeah.
Uh,
If they sent me
I know, I would have, yes.
I know
okay.
it's not, but I know it's not, but it's how Immanuel Kant did it. Write that down. It's how Immanuel Kant asked the question that you, I'm sorry, that you were asking. You were
Okay.
saying, here we are as 20-somethings, young adults, we're about to launch, we're trying to figure out what's our purpose and what we ought to be doing.
Right.
And now you're upsetting us with what there even is for reality, what we think we might know, and how are we ever going to get us started and do something we're supposed to do?
So for myself, I've already thought of all these things, but not all these things, but a lot of these, you know, you have a moment in your life where you're thinking like, what is my purpose? What's the point of all
Listen, this
this?
is really important, everybody. Don't lose track of this. This is really important. Go to the first part of that sentence. You're lecturing. Go. And we come to these points when we ask these questions about.
Oh, well, in my life, I've already gotten to that point. Like, I've already been at that point where I was like, okay, wait, what's my purpose? So you kind of pump the brakes and you rethink things and
Yes.
you're like, why am I doing all this if I'm not really sure of any answers? That's kind of in the same point when you start questioning religion or
Yes.
your own philosophies on life, right? And it all comes back to philosophy.
Right.
But is this why philosophy isn't that popular? Because people don't like to think that they don't know. Especially
Yes.
Americans.
That's
we don't
part
like
of it.
to not know things.
You're gonna make
We
me
like to concrete type A.
Yes.
So
Go.
So my point is that why don't we talk about these things and what's the point of life if we don't have these answers? Why are we all running towards something, living to be 70 something if at the end of that we still don't know?
Well, it might be more about the
I don't
journey
know.
of finding
I don't know,
the
that's
answers.
the point. I don't know either.
And what she listen, everybody. Listen.
The journey.
She's doing philosophy. She's demonstrating philosophy right there. Give her a hand. Now, she also is potentially generating powerfully possible quiz and exam questions.
Can she get another dollar?
Yo, can you repeat that?
Just another
I
one.
was like, can't take my Now, did any of you notice that? No, you couldn't have, because it only happened since the class started. Since you got here, something became visible on the discussions part of the website, the Canvas class website, that allows you to try to come up with clever and relevant, appropriate, manageable quiz and exam questions. And if I like them when you put them there, I'll buy them. You'll know I bought them because right where you can see it and where everyone else can see it, I will go on there and I'll say, excellent, this has been purchased. When I do that, that means you will see it on a quiz or a test. There's your study sheet. I don't promise it's all that'll be on the test and quiz. It's probably not the only thing. But it will be there if I buy it. If it shows up on a quiz, then I promise you, if you see it on a quiz, you're going to see it on the midterm. of course, if the quiz was before the midterm. I can't have you see it on the midterm if it's a quiz after the midterm because we don't loop temporally yet. If I can figure out how, I'll do that too, but not yet. But if it's on the midterm, then I promise you it'll also be on the final. I will cut and paste the midterm onto the final. Okay? So that will be a powerful study aid. Yes, ma'am.
So what I'm gathering is that this class is not procedural. It's not to gain some certain response, so we all need to have some memorized response to something. It's to actually get us to think and to think about why are we doing what we're doing as 20-somethings.
I'm going to run out of money if you keep doing that.
Well, because is that not the point? And I think
It
that's
is the
beautiful.
point.
Education at its finest. Thank you. Facilitating conversation and learning about one another and
A
human
college
experience.
professor in a few years right there. Yes.
She said,
$1 for you if I had
You're-
some money.
you're
Right?
awesome. Yes, ma'am.
Good old piece.
Right.
Yes. As fast as he can grade them, you'll get them back and you'll own them.
All right.
I feel like everything that Megan was saying is something that we all think about, but I feel like that's just the journey and gift of life. It's always questioning and always thinking, isn't it? I mean, that's what I've learned from my
It is.
parents. Is that you always think and question. Like my dad had a midlife crisis a couple of years ago, wanted to buy a convertible, and
Red?
he wanted to buy a convertible. He still wants to.
Did he get it?
Well, he's on his apps all the time trying to buy another car, but anyway, I'm just saying, like, he's always back
Hope
to
he
what
gets
are
it.
we-
I know, right?
So I want to
crowdsource it.
But you know,
Where's
he's
the
saying,
problem,
like,
though?
even at 50, he was still like, well, what do I want to do with my life? You know, and then
How
I
old
know
is he now?
he's 53.
Oh, he's so young.
But like my grandma, I don't know. I think we all have grandparents that still, I wish I did this, or I don't know what I'm doing, and then they
Yes.
say, don't make those mistakes that I did.
And in this class, I pray, and I don't mean that as an expression. I mean, yes, before I come to class, I spend time every time we have class praying that because you were here, you won't be having those kind of regrets when you're old and wrinkly. Because people just do whatever. There was two old ladies that lived in one of these, not assisted living, but the kind of upscale retirement thing where your door opens to out, you can go outside to the real world, or you can go in the hall and go down to the cafeteria or play pinochle or whatever with the other old people, retirement home places. And these were some ancient old women, Mildred and Ethel, and they each still had cars, help us all, and every Thursday they would get up mid-morning after breakfast, they'd get all dolled up and put on entirely too much makeup the way they do, and coiffed to the hilt, much hairspray. And then they would take turns with who drove their car to take the other person to the buffet where they could, put extra food in their bag to take home, and where they could go do window shopping at the mall, and they could go for a little walk in the park, and they'd have their day out. But they had this deal. They knew that they were sleeping. They had this sense. But they weren't allowed, by agreement, to criticize one another's driving. No matter how old they drove, they weren't allowed to criticize the other person's driving. Well, on one trip, Ethel is taking her car, and as they're heading off to the buffet, to their first stop, Mildred is holding on to the that thing up there, the hammer, and she's just closing her eyes because Ethel had already been up on the sidewalk and taken out garbage cans, mailboxes, and almost dudes walking their dog. It's terrible. And through red lights, and the speed is getting greater and greater and greater, and they don't do speed. The reason that the world comes so fast when you're sampling so infrequently. So they're going usually at such a pace that people are swearing if it's a two-lane road and there's no way to pass. But this time, Ethel is thinking she's in a Formula car at Sears Point, and she is just pedal to the metal. And after it became apparent that somebody was possibly going to die, Mildred finally said, I'm sorry, I know we have a deal, but I have to say something. You're scaring me. You're scaring me, Ethel. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? She said, and she started listing this record of the horrible things that have occurred in the wake of this out-of-control automobile, apparently. And she's looking at her and incredulous. And what in the world are you talking about? And she says, so I need you to slow down or pull over or something. And Ethel says, oh, was I driving?
Bro.
Oh shit.
She was alright.
We have this notion that we're a passenger, that we're not the driver. We've been told that things are just sort of playing out. You get born a certain way, and that's the cards you're dealt. That's the hand you're dealt. And this is the way we do things, so you need to do them that way. And this is just true, just take my word for it. Whether it's me, or whether it's science, or whether it's your family, or whether it's your culture, we're not intentional about figuring out reality. Even when we think we are, because we're rebellious on a couple of things, we're not. We're accepting millions of things, and then we have these little token things that we, oh, well, I don't buy that.
No way.
We've all been like, yeah, that is how it is. The cards were dealt is how it is. But also, then you have the scriptures that tell us that God gives us choice. That is the main defining thing about us as human beings, is that we have the power of choice. So, getting the cards you're dealt, yeah, that's true to a certain extent, but then we have the power to change whatever we want if we put our minds to it. Is that not true?
I think it's entirely true. Have any of you ever done like the 23andMe thing? You send in your spit sample and they give you some 80 some odd little factoids that they see from your DNA and tell you whether you're carrying certain recessive traits that you could give to your offspring. You ever done that? You ever know about that?
Yeah.
Your dad did it?
Yeah, because it's best for men.
But there's even studies shown of like people who have had like, it's really commonly in even prostate cancer, it's shown that like even your diet can like reverse something like that.
Yeah, so it turns out that if you say, is something caused by your genes or by your environment, it's a hard thing to answer that. It's hard to answer that. And it turns out that there's another factor that you could say might be influenced by your environment, might make up part of your environment, might be influenced by your genes, but it's actually its own thing. And that's your choice. Your free will. You choose certain things. And it turns out that if you choose them based on false information, sometimes it doesn't even matter. You ever heard of a placebo? Everyone know what a placebo is? Yes. Why does a placebo work? Because you think it does.
Yeah, that's
How could it be true that it works when you think it does?
because we have the ability to choose how we're going to think about something. Like, if someone gets dumped, they have the ability to choose, oh, this is the end of my life, I'm never going to find anyone else again. Or they can choose to think, you know what, I was okay before, I'm okay now. You have the ability to make that choice in your head of how you're going to think about things. And that affects a lot of the things in your life. Well, most of it.
Yes. Now, all of these things that we've been talking about for the last few minutes go on the third question. They go underneath the third question. In other words, we can ask, what is life? That's one thing. But we can say, what is anything? We can have those discussions, those are important, but then getting down to what her question was, but what, okay, but how should I live? How should I live my life?
Live hopefully.
Live hopefully, yes.
So And pretty much that there are some things that are like reality. And
What do you mean by that?
so when we were talking about, so like rules of reality, like E equals MC squared. We don't know necessarily if that's true, but that's what we perceive to be true. But from those things, we then take those questions, we find out, okay, energy is this thing. And then we say, okay, from this, what can we know? Okay, we know that at the smallest level, there's just energy. And from that, we have elements. Then we have the periodic table. So we know that all these different elements are different. So what do we know about all of us? Is that we're going to be different because nothing is one thing unless it goes all the way back to that up there. Just
Well, I
energy.
can make this worse for you. Now we'll go
Please.
back to number 1. With E equals MC squared, and just in case you don't know, this is energy. You can measure however you want in joules or in anything you want to convert joules to. But energy is like you could measure how much energy there was in the wave going back and forth in the slinky. Equals, M is for mass. That's how much, when you have some stuff, like this chalk or like the metal the slinky is made out of, how much of that is there? It's an extensive quality. It's how much stuff there is. So the amount of energy equals the amount of mass times why this is, help me, and we'll both understand, times the square of how fast light goes, which is the speed limit for the universe. That's ultimate speed. And you don't actually get stuff to that speed. You can get it kind of close, but it doesn't ever go faster than that. But here's why it gets worse than we have the energy in, and we can say that the matter, the periodic table comes from energies made of energy and all that stuff because we decompose it. Well, here's something that makes it even harder to understand. Turns out that there isn't even actually any waves. The waves are just a parable for us to help understand it. There's just who said relationship? It is just a relationship. And here's the strange part of that relationship. It's shaped like a wave because when you plot something, all you're plotting is a dynamic of varying probability of the thing being at this place at this time. Like you could say, okay, here you have like a 70% chance if right there you look there to find it at this time. Here you have a 30% chance, and we can get the line down here because there's always some chance. It turns out that when something is someplace, probabilistically, it's actually everywhere. Everything, every little piece of stuff actually has some probability of being everywhere at any moment. It's just very low probability of finding it there if you look. By everywhere, I mean everywhere in the whole universe. So when we have it, okay, right there you have like a 90% chance of finding it there then 9 times out of 10, when you look for it there, you'll find it there at that moment. How do we wrap our mind around that?
Is that when we don't find life on other planets?
No, that's probably not why we don't find life on other planets. Although it might be related, probably not. But here's a strange thing also. It turns out that even when something is a particle that we've looked at and determined, measured, the particle can completely go out of existence one moment and then just come back into existence some other moment, somewhere else. So its existence is not constant, even. Now we're definitely looking at number 1. Now, some of you already, you were the first, took us into number 2. Because you said, how do you know these things? Did you do these experiments? Do we know, did you just saying that? How do you know that's true? This thing right here, this whole number 2, there is a $5 word for it, and it's going to most likely be something that one of you will have thought to put on the test or the quiz, because I'll probably buy it if it shows up in the right form in that little for sale lot where you put your questions. This is really talking about a branch of philosophy that is called epistemology. You do need to know that word. Epistemology is all about trying to figure out how we can know things and what knowing things and what knowledge even is. Yes?
So if we know nothing, then why are we doing all these things? But why aren't we going more off of, do we go more off of feelings then? Like what makes you happy? Because you know that. Like you do know that. You know when you feel happiest. You know that about yourself. You know when you're sad. You know, those are certain things. Those are probably maybe the only things that you know is your, or maybe sometimes you don't even know your emotional state. Sometimes we get crazy, right? But aside from that, you usually know how you feel about something.
Okay, what you're saying right now has a technical term.
Okay.
You are right now stating the tenets of phenomenology. That's a study of our experience.
Okay.
Okay, that's of our inside experience in here. You know, the
But
phenomena in our mind.
there's nothing to prove. Like, if I see Shekinah right now, I can't tell by looking at her, wow, you look really happy, or you must be really sad. Because I'm not in her
And
body.
here, and now you're getting on to another thing that we're going to have to grapple with. We'll grapple with it more later, but since you brought it up, how do you know that I, or Shekinah, has a mind like yours?
Well, I would assume.
Yes, I know, but how do you
Oh,
know?
right, I assumed it might be. Well,
Why am I not just a
because
really
our perception-
super well-programmed robot? Because in 10 years, you won't be able to tell.
right. Well,
But
right
there's
now,
still no mind then. I have a mind, I'm telling you, I think, that's similar to yours.
Yeah.
But I don't know that because I don't know if you have one. How would you share your experience with me? You could say things and I could say, well, that's just the way you're programmed to talk. But you're not having this looking out through the inside, through the eyes kind of experience.
but I get what you're saying. But going
And
back.
that's known as the other minds problem.
Okay.
You all do want to know the other minds problem too. The other minds problem is the impossibility of knowing if anyone else even has a mind.
Okay, well then you're just questioning literally like, is this skin? Like what is, like is this air? Like is this the table? You're questioning the existence of everything. Like are we
Yes.
just waste of space? No, right? So
How do you know? If it's
I
a video
know.
game,
I
if
was
it's a
not put
video
on this
game, then
nice
is it a
green earth.
waste?
What?
If it is truly a video game,
It is not.
have you seen the movie The Matrix?
Yes, I have.
The Matrix was made after questions that were thousands of years old that philosophy has been asking. It's a very heavy philosophical movie.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So notice how most of the time in human experience, there's so many people in this world, and we ignore these issues most of the time. And we go off of like the Bible, and we go off of what's heart. Like, what's your heart like? How do you care? What are you doing? Like,
Unless we meet somebody from another religion who sees it entirely differently, and then we kill them.
or we don't.
That's why we're
Or
here.
we don't
Or
though.
we don't.
See, because if
Or we don't.
we are teaching
Because
up
they-
students
because
like
then
you
they
are.
agree with us.
But if we're teaching up students like you are, in the sense of, hey, listen to conversations, talk about it. Don't just be one-sided.
If
Then it's
we
a
are
different
ever
experience.
to truly experience the depth of how very different kinds of worldviews experience things, we have to really work at unstapling all of our stack of papers in our minds, and that's what we're trying to do here. If you don't take this apart and realize it comes apart, then you cannot be part of the solution when people try to get you and all your fellow countrymen to kill people because they see things differently.
So in philosophy then, are we just gonna like I mean, I don't know. Are we gonna use God as any part of this? Because then,
Absolutely.
because I was thinking then, because it means that God makes no sense if like we're in a dream and like is this error?
But
like,
that's where
is this
atheism
error?
comes from, and
I intend,
right?
you guys are running right ahead, I love it.
Okay.
I intend to show you, even mathematically, what strengthens my faith in God
Okay.
from philosophy.
What are we supposed to be learning? Like in this class?
I've got it.
First, you need
I
to
already
do
know.
some unlearning.
Right. Okay.
Just a second.
Well, like 20 plus. Should we just toss morals in? Should we toss all the virtues and stuff like that? Because if we're not here for a reason, and if some of us might be robots in this group, then should we just treat them like trash then? Because they don't have feelings.
No.
That's a very good question. Listen to what she just said. Do you realize the implications of what she just said?
Yeah.
She said, wait a minute, the things we're talking about here could determine whether it makes any sense to treat these people one way or entirely another way. Do you know that human beings have treated other human beings differently because they didn't think those human beings actually had a soul or a mind, that they were like worms or dogs who they believed didn't have a consciousness, they were just machines. That's some of the tragedy thinking that was used to rationalize keeping people like property. Because they couldn't actually look at another person and see that that person really had this same miraculous experience of the universe that they did, and that they were actually, here's the dangerous thing, the minute we think that other people are not me, the minute I think that you aren't actually me, that it's a silly distinction that's convenient in just this many dimensions, but in terms of greater truth, when we add another dimension, there's actually no difference between you and me. We're just aspects of the same reality. Why did Jesus say so clearly that he and the Father were one, that he wanted to be one with us, and he wanted his disciples to be one? To realize their oneness. Why did he say that? It's not just a cute little calling card thing, greeting card thing, oh, we're like one. He was saying, look, don't abuse yourself. And that's what you're doing when you mistreat other people. You're mistreating me. He says, as you've done it unto one of the least of these, my brethren, you have done it unto me. How's that possible? Because the distinctions we make, you're black, you're a woman, you're Asian, you have black hair and long hair, I don't have hair. I'm a man, and an older one at that. I'm an Adventist, I'm American. I'm a teacher, I'm a Californian. We make these little distinctions. And part of our brain, actually the temporal parietal junction, that part of our brain creates this notion of a separate thing that I happen to be. This notion that there's a me. But it's just a notion. And we can take a strong magnet and put it in the right place, and you'll lose track of the idea that there's a you. In fact, when people have meditative experiences, when people have experiences like Paul had when he was on the road to Damascus, when people get revived in the emergency room and they've had these near-death experiences or they're clinically dead, and then they're going, whoa. Do you know that all distinctions are absurdity? That is often called enlightenment when people have that experience.
Since you say that that second question is like so are you like a part of a branch of philosophy? Are you just saying that the other two is basically other branches? Because if you're gonna ask what is there, that's basically studying like knowledge, which is
Well, no, asking what is there isn't the same as studying knowledge necessarily, but it could be. But just saying what's real, what is real.
okay. So are you saying
What,
that
that thing, what is real, is called ontology. You need to know this. Ontology. It comes from the Greek word ontos, which means being, existence, isness. Okay? Let's talk about the green unicorn standing on the desk behind you. What could we say about it? The sparkly, yes. But the problem is that it has a different kind of isness than the statue of the thinker that it was carved in Africa and sold on eBay that I bought. At least they say it was carved in Africa. It was probably in China or something, but they sold it to me as a genuine African mass-produced item. So. It has an isness that varies from the isness of all of the unicorns on the desk. Right?
So all your questions start with what? Right? All these questions start with what?
Well, all of Kant's do.
But I feel like the sole purpose of this class is we're answering why.
Well, there's a lot of purposes for the class.
But I feel like the sole purpose is basically you're making us think, making us reconsider why we do what we do. Why are we here at Pacific Union College? Why Adventism? Why existing?
I suspect that one of the major reasons that you're in this class is to ask why.
Okay, well,
and that's
now,
good.
Yes.
This is a perfect place to do it. It's a safe place to do it. And my intention is not to unravel your Adventism.
Well, but it's not necessarily unraveling. It's making you think, because you're not telling us one way or the other. We're coming to our own conclusions.
If any of you are Adventist, then I hope that by the time this class ends, your Adventistness is less brittle.
Because it makes us better, because when people ask us why, we actually know. So, is that a purpose?
Or we know a lot more about what it means to ask why. And about what we could ever hope to expect by asking why. Sometimes when people ask you a question, you go, well, that really can't be answered. You need to question the question.
Oh, shoot.
There's levels to it.
Yeah,
Right.
No,
You had me
when
at
you're
last.
writing a final exam, do you not question the question?
So can we
People
write
put
a
their
question?
hand up
for
and
the
question the
exam
question all
So
the
can I
time.
rewrite the
Because
question?
at that moment, something's writing on it. And I'm suggesting that there's a lot writing on questioning the question. These questions. Your hand was up, and then over to her.
Yeah, I just want to say, yeah, you did actually phenomenal job.
Thank you, girl, right here. I hand up.
I didn't come here to learn about philosophy, to be honest. I came to get grades to move on to my next level. But you did a great job in making a mistake. You mentioned something about particle being in one place at one time, and then another time not being there.
Yeah, they can come in and out of existence.
Now this is a real thing.
Real, yeah.
This is like along lines of like television.
Sure, it is teleportation, and it's also probably tunneling, quantum tunneling.
And this is something that's being tested.
Yeah.
Yeah, in fact, all I have to do to make stuff go out of existence is just cool it, temperature-wise, to very close to negative 73.15 degrees Celsius. 0 Kelvin, because then it becomes, instead of being matter, it becomes a Bose-Einstein condensate, and then its isness is just all over the map. And that's laboratory science.
Radiolab also did it and it was on too.
They did, yeah, I've heard it. Yeah.
This is why we're talking about like asking questions and questions. This is why Jesus like always answered in questions.
Partly, he used the Socratic method, and we will learn in this class what the Socratic method is. We'll look at how Jesus used it, how Socrates used it, and also that's what we're doing. Because I'm old. I will. I will. I hope that all of you, your week
I'm gonna let that
That's why
slide.
I'm like
Right to the end, and I'm eager to see you again on Tuesday.